How High We Go in the Dark is built like a constellation. 14 linked stories, each its own bright point, but together forming a single shape: humanity trying to stay human while the world changes beneath its feet. It begins in the near future and stretches for centuries, following the ripple effects of one disaster across families, strangers, and eventually the stars. Think of each story as a stop on one long timeline of consequence rather than a separate anthology piece. The spark is painfully modern. Melting permafrost reveals what the Earth used to keep sealed. In 2030, grieving archaeologist Cliff Miyashiro travels to the Arctic Circle, specifically the Batagaika crater, to continue the work of his daughter Clara, who has died. There, the team finds the preserved remains of a prehistoric girl and a dormant virus that will not stay dormant. This opening discovery is the book's patient zero hinge, linking private grief to a global turning point. Cliff's chapters are drenched in the ache of legacy, what we inherit, what we leave, and what we refuse to talk about until it's too late. Clara's journals become a second voice in his head, part confession, part instruction manual for surviving grief. Around them, the crater is a literal wound in the earth, proof that the past isn't past, it's just waiting for heat. The crater works as both setting and symbol, an exposed scar where history and consequence spill out. When the Arctic plague escapes into the world, the book refuses to treat the apocalypse like fireworks. Instead, it shows what's more terrifying: continuity. Society doesn't instantly collapse, it adapts, inventing new jobs, new rituals, new ways to love people who might not be here next week. The horror here is gradual normalization. Catastrophe becomes an everyday background condition. A few years later, we meet Skip, a struggling comedian who takes what sounds like a harmless gig, until he arrives at the City of Laughter, a theme park designed to help terminally ill children die painlessly. It's grotesque, heartbreaking, and weirdly tender, the kind of place that could only exist when a culture is desperate to package the unpackageable. This is the book's starkest example of how care can be repackaged into spectacle when institutions panic. Skip becomes an attendant for families walking toward goodbye. He watches parents perform normalcy like a magic trick, smiles pasted on, hands shaking, voices too bright. And then he meets Dory and her son Fitch, and something changes. His cynicism starts to crack, because love is stubborn even when it's outnumbered. Skip's arc clarifies the novel's moral center. Compassion is a decision you keep making under pressure. The park's signature ride is the Chariot of Osiris, a roller coaster that moves fast enough to stop a child's heart. It's symbolism with teeth: death dressed up as spectacle, grief forced through a funnel labeled entertainment, because the human mind can only stare at the sun, or the void, for so long before it needs a mask. Even the name, Osiris, points at the book's recurring idea of death and rebirth cycles, twisted here into policy. Then the novel tilts into the surreal. June, one of the first adults to contract the plague, falls into a coma and wakes in a black space with other comatose people. Floating globes hold their memories, little planets of regret, joy, shame, and longing, and in that darkness, strangers begin to care for each other anyway. The coma realm makes inner life physical, turning memory into a shared landscape you can move through. When they discover a baby among them, they build a living pyramid, human bodies stacked into a desperate architecture of hope, until gravity loosens and June releases the child upward. It's one of the book's core gestures. The future is fragile, so we lift it together, even if we don't survive to see where it lands. This moment translates hope into literal labor, people becoming scaffolding for what comes next. In Pig Son, the plague's cruelty collides with biotech desperation. David Dory's ex-husband works growing human organs inside pigs for transplants. One pig becomes sentient, starts to speak, and suddenly medical resource becomes someone. The story pivots the book from survival logistics to personhood. Who gets counted when the rules are breaking? The world responds the way it often does to miracles, with bureaucracy and appetite. Officials want the pig transferred for testing, but the pig's accelerated brain growth is killing it. Given one night of freedom, it asks to have its organs harvested to save others, a choice that turns using bodies into offering, and forces the reader to sit in the moral gray without blinking. Consent becomes the razor edge here. separating sacrifice from consumption even when both look similar. Grief, in this book, doesn't just happen, it gets built. Elegy Hotel follows Dennis, who manages a hotel where families can conduct extended visitations for the dead. His own family history is a tangle of avoidance and old injuries, and when his mother dies, he's forced to face what he keeps postponing. You don't get infinite time to become the person you meant to be. By turning mourning into an industry, the world tries to give shape to loss, and Dennis has to decide what shape his own life will take. This is one of the novel's recurring motifs: new funerary practices as mirrors of new realities. Hotels for mourning, skyscrapers for remembrance, ceremonies stretched longer because people are trying to wring meaning out of loss, like holding a note until it stops shaking. These invented rituals function like societal scar tissue, proof the culture is healing, but also proof it was wounded. In Speak, Fetch, Say I Love You, a father and son orbit the absence of a wife and mother. The father repairs robodogs for a living, and the family's own robodog, Hollywood, becomes a mechanical shrine, something you can fix, reboot, and talk to when the human you miss can't answer back. Hollywood isn't just a gadget. It's a container for grief, holding the voice the family can't stop reaching for. The symbolism is devastatingly simple. Love wants a place to go. Sometimes it goes into prayer. Sometimes it goes into a machine with failing parts. And sometimes the only way to say, I love you, is to keep showing up for the people still breathing. In other words, the book treats love like energy never erased, only redirected. Songs of Your Decay moves into the science of endings. Aubrey works at a body farm, tracking decomposition in plague victims to learn what the disease does and what might undo it. She bonds with Laird, a terminal patient donating his body for knowledge, and their relationship becomes an intimate argument with time. The clock is always running, but tenderness still counts. The science isn't presented as cold data. It's framed as a relationship with the dying and the dead. Here, decay becomes a kind of music, information written in flesh, a final message the dead leave behind. Aubrey's letters to Laird underscore the book's insistence that mourning is also communication, love continuing to speak after the listener is gone. Decay becomes text, in this chapter evidence that bodies still tell stories after voices stop. Eventually, the horizon stops being metaphorical and becomes literal. In Life Around the Event Horizon, Brian and Teresa work on breakthroughs in space travel because Earth, battered by plague and climate collapse, is starting to feel like a house with smoke under every door. The event horizon is the point of no return. Once you cross it, you don't get the old world back. The metaphor lands cleanly. Leaving might save humanity, but it permanently changes what home means. A gallery a century, a cry a millennium delivers the long, aching leap. Cliff's family echoes forward. His wife Mickey and granddaughter Yumi end up aboard the USS Yamato. Yumi enters cryosleep. Mickey sleeps in intervals and paints murals across the ship with Dory, carrying art like a torch through the dark. Thousands of years pass before they find a habitable planet and begin again. This storyline is the novel's generational bridge, transporting earlier grief into far future possibility. Those murals are more than decoration, they're portable history. A species survives not only by solving physics, but by transporting meaning, stories, images, love letters, inside jokes, grief that refuses to be erased. The ship becomes a floating memorial and a cradle. Art becomes the survival kit here, proof that endurance without memory would be a hollow victory. In the later stories, healing tries to look ordinary again. One man, Dan Paul, wakes from a plague coma and invites neighbors to a barbecue, small, almost laughably simple, except that it's a declaration. We will be a we again. Meanwhile, a lonely man in Tokyo, Akira, finds connection in a VR cafe until the weight of isolation and suffering turns tragic, and he's left choosing whether to reach back toward real family, real help. These chapters argue that rebuilding is less a breakthrough than a series of tiny, brave invitations back into the community. The symbolism here hits like a quiet cymbal. Community is not automatic. You have to practice it. Technology can simulate closeness, but it can't replace the hard work of being witnessed, being needed, being responsible to other living people. The book's warning is gentle but firm. Convenience can mimic connection, but it can't fully substitute belonging. Death rituals return, transformed. A sculptor helps Mabel design an ice sculpture made from her remains, an entire funeral that melts into the sea, teaching everyone present that impermanence isn't an insult, it's the point. Another story follows Rina back to Japan for a communal memorial urn, where family estrangement softens into reconciliation, and the future, pregnancy, continuity, return, insists on being welcomed. Both rituals deliver the same message. Grief can be shared, and shared grief can turn into repair. Finally, the book reveals its strangest, widest frame. The scope of possibility is narrated by a world builder, an alien being involved in creating civilization's Earth, included, who reincarnates through history, threading herself through the lives we've seen. It's a cosmic twist that reframes everything as both accident and responsibility. The universe is vast, but choices still matter. The last note is a message from the USS Yamato back toward Earth, a request for a reply, because even at the edge of time, the most human act is still the same: reaching out into the dark, hoping someone answers. That final outreach is the thesis in motion. Meaning survives when someone, somewhere, answers back. If you enjoyed this video, consider giving us a like, subscribe to see more content. Let us know in the comments which books you would like to see next. Happy learning. We will see you in the next video.